The fall off of Super 17. Before I get into this video, if you want to see a timeline or a fall off story of any unit in Dragon Ball Legends that I haven't done, let me know in the comment section below. And on top of that, before there are guys crying in the comment section, this will also be a timeline, so it won't just be touching on his downfall, but anything after that as well. Super 17 is one of the most menacing units ever in Dragon Ball Legends history. A lot would argue that his peak of damage is higher than anything else we've ever seen, especially if you compare for the times where the meta he released in, there's a lot more dangerous opponents to deal with. So to be able to perform at the height that he did is absolute insanity. During his notorious reign, he built up fame and earned the nickname of the dictator who was a complete problem during World War II. You guys know who I'm talking about. Many called him that just because of how dangerous he was in PvP, but we gotta talk about how he became the most dangerous unit
and his downfall after that.
Let's talk about his release. A popular meme that we're all aware of.
Nobody can beat me when I'm Super 17.
Well, on top of that, it made him have even more spotlight because he had the pleasure of being the 2024 Battle Hour unit. I personally only have good feelings associated with Super 17 because I was actually there in Los Angeles when he got revealed. If you guys don't know, I'm from London, so it's quite far, 12-hour flight, so I can only appreciate the greatness that is Super 17. He's a very simple unit, high damage, very efficient, and he forces people to get shut down with something that is free, which I will get into later. But stealing strikes and blue cards is enough to shut down your opponent at any capacity, and from there his blasts are free. He can just run free and do the amount of damage that he wants to do, which easily at that time was the highest amount of damage you could do in a short amount of time. A lot of people naturally were going to summon for this guy just off him being the Battle Hour unit. A lot of people are going to summon on this guy just for the memes, but it ended up being that he's actually one of the most insane units that we would see in Dragon Ball Legends. Very oppressive and shut down a lot of people, made it very difficult to play. Nobody wanted to go up against him. And then the overwhelming factor for his release, which I haven't spoke about once yet, he's a GT unit. In 2024, they tried to push GT for a lot of the year, and at the start of the year, they dropped a bunch of GT units. Super 17 being the most oppressive one, if not the second most oppressive one that we got in that whole year. But we gotta get into why this was the case. I'm just gonna give you a kit refresher so you can completely understand why this guy is absolutely menacing. When he's last stand on his main ability, he's able to apply minus 70% to enemy sustained damage cut, meaning that the damage he could already do will just go through the roof. When he enters the battlefield, for the next arts card that he uses, he will get 400% to the amount unique gauges charged. And that's quite insane because it meant that once he presses that first card, his gauge will fill and he will get the effects of it instantly. Something very underrated, every time he does a blast art, he's gonna apply the enemy minus 80% to health restoration. So at the end of his combo, you won't be able to heal anything. So for those guys that have endurance, once that endurance gets popped, if you didn't switch out prior, you're gonna get tap attacked and that's gonna be the end of you. And I'd say one of the biggest things in his kit is a new mechanic that we haven't seen since for how oppressive it is. If he does a tap attack or a tap shot or a quick attack, so anything that's free, you know, them quick attacks, they're all free. The tap attack's free, the tap shot is free. It doesn't cost a thing. If that lands, he will seal your strike cards and special move damage. So imagine getting quick attack. In that space, normally people use a unit with blast armor and strike through the blast. And because this unit is ranged, he's gonna hit a blast immediately and you can't do anything but vanish. So it puts you in a chokehold where you have to play evasive, even if you didn't want to. And that's what made him so dangerous. To be able to consistently do that for free is absolutely absurd. A nice little touch here, on cover change, he gets the ultimate. He has a strike cover change and his cover change can change the ultimate as well as the blue card. Now here's where the danger comes in. Once his gauge fills, which is extremely easy to fill, it just fills from pressing cards. He gets 25% damage inflicted for 50 timer counts, which cannot be cancelled, and it stacks. He will also get cover null, which makes it so that he can just continue his combo. Again, he's a very simple guy, but super efficient in what he does. On top of that, it's not advised for the enemy to fight back because every single time the enemy uses an arts card, he will also get 3 new cards at most if he has 3 or fewer, meaning that if you get into a blast for blast, he's gonna be going infinitely unless he just gets unlucky and draws strikes, which isn't happening because he's a ranged type unit. And it's also not advised for the enemy to switch if he's comboing you, because if you switch, especially if he has Covenant already up, which he probably will, he's also going to get a blast card and key. And also when he's on the defensive end, it's beneficial to not switch because he will also go type neutral against damage sustained. And he takes 20 key. And just to put the icing on the cake, he cancels buffs if ultimate arts, awaken arts, and rising rushes are hit against him. He doesn't have survivability, but cancelling buff for someone on your team to take the hit is still very valuable. Now, only 2 more things I want to mention. Every time he does a blast start, he's doing 170% to blast damage inflicted if the enemy does blast armor. So if they try to go through your blast start, boy, that's gonna hurt, especially if they're a yellow. They are not making it through that. And then we got his green card, the energy absorption. Any blast attack that comes his way, whether it's a blue card, a green card, a tap attack, blast starts, when he presses that green card, he'll absorb it. And here's what's dangerous about this. Off just pressing it, he goes type neutral, reduces the enemy key by 50, seals enemy main ability and their rising rush, and that's just off pressing it. But if the absorption is successful, there's a bunch more that changes the game completely, and in his prime, it guarantees a kill. He gets his vanish gauge back 100%, his unique gauge charge rate goes to 100%, so his next card's gonna fill his gauge. He gets 50% damage inflicted, so he's gonna guarantee an insane amount of damage, and then he's gonna take 50 of your key, turn your vanishing gauge to 0. All of that happens infinitely, by the way, minus the vanishing gauge. That's only 3 times. But the danger here, on top of all of that, he gives you no switching for free time accounts. That means you can't even switch out to protect yourself. The only way you could escape this is if you tackled because Super 17 didn't attack, which is just silly, or you managed to just get enough keys somehow to do blast armor. And even then, he would literally take away your whole health because of the blast piercing damage that he will do. So if that green card gets landed on you, say goodbye to whatever units on the battlefield. Now we got to address what his situation was like at the time, because Super 17 on his own is already super menacing, but there are factors around him that made him even more menacing that he would have been alone. One thing I need to bring up, and a lot of people forget when they talk about Super 17, is the Red Cell Zenkai. If you guys don't know, Red Cell's a unit that released many years ago. I don't remember the exact year, but he's one of the first revival units in Dragon Ball Legends. In his prime, he was good, but he had a second prime when he Zenkai'd, and he was the perfect support layer for Super 17, being a red unit that's going to Zenkai buff powerful opponent while also having that survivability factor. You run that double red together, give them both the same Zenkai buffs. You're running almost a 5-time Zenkai buff team, and maybe you want to leader slot somebody else, and that team would be super juiced on top of the damage Super 17 can already do while being on the boost. It was honestly a recipe for everybody else's downfall. There's a lot of factors to Red Cell beyond his Zenkai buff though. His revival layer, which I already spoke about. On his main ability, he spawns a green card pre-transform, and that green card he could also turn into a blue card. Then post-transform or revival, his main ability draws a blue card. All of these don't have to be used by Cell. They can be used by Super 17, which is an easy scenario where you get a green card with Super 17 and take out somebody for the free ski. And to put the icing on the cake, Zenkai Cell isn't one of those units that you just use as a bench or a support layer to make the main unit the star. If needed be, Cell will make himself the striker of the team. He could do amazing damage because you have to remember he's being fed the same Zenkai buffs that Super 17 is. They're both androids as well, so it just naturally made it a recipe that would bring, I guess you could say, perfection. So this crazy synergy made it unreal to run Super 17. If you're running him, you're doing a max amount of damage. No other team had crazy synergy like this at that time. Not to say other teams weren't good, but if you wanted a peak of damage, Super 17 with Red Cell and then Zenkai buff galore, you're not escaping. I remember clearly at that time, a lot of people would downplay Super 17 by saying that he needs the Zenkai buffs to be good. Well, unfortunately for the haters, that's just the scenario he had, and why would he not use a perfect scenario for himself? With any other unit, they wouldn't get that slack. That's just the scenario you have to deal with, and Super 17 had the pleasure of being handed the super team of death. But enough about Red Cell. There was a lot more going on during this meta period in Super 17's prime. Let's talk about other units that were surrounding him but also could be run with him. First off, we got the biggest guy. A lot of you guys are probably waiting for his mention. We've got Ultra Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. This guy here, the Ultra people didn't want to drop at that time, but they just decided to drop him anyways. Being green, he synergizes extremely well with red, and Ultra Gohan is also a range type, so naturally that synergy is unreal. As well as being an enemy, he's also the best partner because he has the anti-blast card. So imagine that anti-blast card that can be used by Ultra Gohan's teammates. You're running Ultra Gohan on the leader slot. You've got the green, which destroys blues, which protects the red from the blues, Gohan is like the perfect leader slot option alongside that red powerful opponent team with Red Cell and Super 17. But just in general as an opponent, Ultra Gohan was very menacing as well, but he did not have the exact same pleasure of a super team with Zenkai buffs. But that also just shows the might of Ultra Gohan, as Super 17 as a Legends Limited had all of these buffs, but Ultra Gohan only had 1 or 2 and was able to keep up at the same standard. And then on the opposite side, we had Golden Frieza as well, bringing LOE back, Lineage of Evil, Frieza Force. A lot of people are running him because he's also an efficient killer. A purple unit who can also synergize well with red. Red destroys yellow, which protects the purple, which Golden Frieza is, from the yellow. So those two also worked well together, also both being powerful opponents. Same situation with Gohan, you could leader slot Ultra Golden Frieza and get a lot of value out of that. So at that time, you could consider these 3 units the big 3. Golden Frieza, Super 17, and Ultra Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. People would just mix and matching pieces to put these units depending on who you had on your team. But I want to also add one more unit that released recently, for this time anyways. We had Ultra UI, the 2023 festival unit. Now because he's also a range type, at this time he has value, but it was mainly because of his snipe. Because of Golden Frieza being purple, Ultra UI being yellow, you run Ultra UI on the leader slot with Super 17. That's a nice mix right there because they're both range type. And then if Golden Frieza tries to escape, Ultra UI would be the clutch man and catch him, switch him back in and hit an ultimate. The unfortunate side of it would be that Ultra Golden Frieza's comeback would do an insane amount of damage because Ultra UI probably wouldn't have any Zenkai buffs. And by this time, he's also off the boost since he's a festival release. But people were using him, so I felt like I should mention him. But to zone back in on Super 17, him and Cell were basically the duo of death, and they were just picking up any third person like it's pick up basketball. We just need a third person, us two will do all the work, just make sure you don't lose the ball. But it just also happened the third they always picked up was just as dominant as them, so it made the teams just impossible to beat. This is what we were dealing with in early 2024. After all that praise, we now have to talk about his downfall. His downfall is quite unfortunate, but it took a while. Contrary to people's belief, Super 17 was up and running very strong up until the anniversary. Ranged teams were running the game. They were very effective, very efficient. Super 17 having Zenkai buffs even post boost, it made him very effective. But up until the anniversary, where I would say his downfall begins, he was very good and very easy to run. But there was one unit that released that really shut him down and made him go from hero or villain to a complete bust. The release of Fusing Super Vegito, the 6th anniversary headliner. Fusing Super Vegito, or Vegito in general, you can just expect for him to get some sort of busted mechanic that's gonna make him the best in the game. And Fusing Super Vegito is no exception to the rule that Vegito has had in the past. We know that he comes with the Rising Rush mechanic where he's able to win any Rising Rush wager. Even if he loses because you pick him, he's gonna do supreme impact damage, which will be enough to kill you at any point, even if you're on the boost. You might think it wouldn't kill, but because he gets type neutral if the enemy cover changes, he's able to do that damage. But we don't have to talk about type neutral because Super 17 has the unfortunate circumstance of being red. For his prime, it was the best thing ever because of the Zenkai buffs he could receive. But as soon as the anniversary started, being red was an absolute crime when this Rising Rush could take out everybody in the game, especially reds because of type advantage. Super 17's damage has been going downhill. He came off the boost, the Zenkai buffs are still there, but there's obviously a decline, plus power creep is kicking in. And just off this one unit and popularity, you could say, people decided to opt in for the anniversary units. But there's a lot more that goes into this. Because of Fusing Super Vegito, we know we entered a period of time where buff cancellation and endurance was the biggest thing. And if Super 17 is not doing enough damage anyways, people having survivability and buff cancellation, the damage that Super 17 can emit is just not as high as it used to be in his prime. And that would be the case for most of the rest of the year. But even talking about Fusing Super Vegito and how menacing he was, that isn't exactly the end of Super 17's story. It's more so the point of no return because he was never able to reach the peak that he had before the anniversary. After his fall off, Super 17's kit didn't exactly get worse. It was more so just the circumstances that made it extremely hard to use him and get places very easily. If you had him high stars, you could definitely use him, but on the defensive end, he was quite clearly a liability even with all those Zenkai buffs. So you could imagine using him without the Zenkai Zenkai buffs, it's not going to be a good look. But post anniversary, we know we entered a period of powerful opponents, so people decided to bring him out, especially with the addition of Omega Shenron, who has indestructible. I already told you how green and red merge very well with the previous option of Ultra Super Saiyan 2 Gohan. It was the same thing while Omega Shenron synergizing super well. So some people decided to bring Super 17 back, and he was a very usable option, also both of them being powerful opponents and GT. Moving forward from here, it's really just if the circumstance made it so that Super 17 could be used. There were opportunity to use him against the likes of Ultra Margin Vegeta, but Ultra Margin Vegeta also has the blast counter, which didn't make it exactly easy to use him, even though red is a very good option to use against yellow. So for Super 17, moving forward from here, it's not really a circumstance of him. The power isn't in his hands, but more so what's being released in the meta, and if there's an option to use him and the meta is serving ranged units as their favorite, then Super 17 will make a return. And I think that shows that his age has been very good. There's been units that have completely taken him down and shut him out of the game. Ultra Turles also being another example, having that second life, especially when he locks you in after the revival layer. Sorry, the comeback layer. I would say that if the circumstance is correct for him, Super 17 is still very much usable, but he's had a lot of downs, and I don't expect it, since he hasn't done so at all, for him to reach his prime ever again. Even if he returns back on the boost, I can't imagine it will be exactly the same, especially with power creep increasing more and more as we move along. But that's going to be it for Super 17's story. I think he's had quite a good uprise, a good downfall, and he actually managed to float along the currents of Dragon Ball Legends throughout 2024. It's not as bad as other units who have had insanely high peaks to never return again. Ultra Super Janemba. And for Super 17 being such a hype unit being revealed at the battle hour, not traditionally a hype unit, but he brought a lot of enjoyability to the game. I have a lot of respect for this unit. So let me know what you guys think about him in the comment section below. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you haven't already, make sure to press the subscribe button. We're on this grind to 200,000 subscribers. I appreciate you guys for watching, man. My name's Zakashi, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one, man.